This is the story of how two brothers from Amsterdam built a speaker so valuable they had to hide it.
We kept everything very close to our chest. We would have our demos inside aluminum briefcase with lock. It would never leave our hand. Focus on licensing of the technology. Become the next Dolby or Intel inside. If they're selling millions of speakers, cool. We'll just take $1 of every speaker you sell, and that's super scalable. This kid is mature. Get it out of the house.
3 years later, they sold it to Sonos for $100 million. The crazy part? They never sold a single product. Mattias, take us back to Amsterdam West. What kind of a kid were you?
I was quite shy. If you knew me, you'd know that I did like to have fun. Most importantly, myself, my brother, my younger sister, we were all very creative. So there was not a day going by that we didn't do anything that had to do with creating something.
And what did sound mean to you that other kids didn't get? Where did that all start?
So my mother, she can sing really well, but it was my father's speaker set that actually made things like go much faster. So he had a speaker set like 2.1, 2 satellite speakers, a subwoofer, and he'd play a tune and he turned all the way up and you could see the doors shaking, like the bass was doing something to the room. And you could feel it. That was the thing that kind of triggered us. We were like, it seems so simple. There's just a speaker, there's music, you turned all the way up and there's so many things moving. So this is something we want to spend more time on. But that's what kind of light lit that up.
And at what point did you both start taking the speakers apart? Going into the engineering of it, where was that curiosity? Where did it come from? Or did it just happen like that?
Yeah, my grandfather on my mother's side, he was an airplane engineer and he would regularly build us things like a go-kart or something. So that's how it started, with just building things and liking sound. And then it came together. And we would go to a thrift shop and he would get a speaker set for $10-ish kind of money. And we could do whatever we wanted with it. So of course, the first thing we did was take it apart. And that's how we playfully learned how to work with it. Like we of course played with Legos like every other kid did, but since we got the opportunity to play with other stuff as well, this was super interesting to us.
At what point did the childhood obsession become serious enough? Maybe this might be what I study at school, what I build a business in. What was that transition like?
I didn't think of professionally doing something with audio in that sense. I always had it as a hobby, but not the intention to do it professionally. For Timothy, my brother, came earlier than for me. I had a broad interest in product design and development in general. So I did industrial design engineering studies at the Textile University of Delft because I felt that product development was very interesting. But Timothy, he chose his studies in the direction of sound. So he studied sound design. So he knew acoustic audio product development. And that actually came together again when he had built a kind of prototype speaker. And he was like, how do I mass manufacture this thing? And then he came to me. And so we could bring those things together, his acoustics knowledge and my industrial design engineering knowledge, to ignite that and look at it more from a professional sense.
You both had a pretty unusual founder pairing in that you left TU Delft, Timothy focused on the cooks. In hindsight, it's almost too perfect. Did it feel that way at the time or only later?
It was so natural that you don't even think about it. Like we both liked sound, we both liked speakers, and we could bring our other passions. He liked to also create music and I liked to develop products. We could bring that together and make something that's like a 1 and 1 is 3 kind of combination.
Before Mayht, you already had a speaker company. You were actually building and selling high-end speakers. What bothered you enough that you walked away from that and thought, let me start again?
It was fun to do that. Just to give an example, we had this customer who had this amazing house and he wanted to have speakers built out of like solid bronze. We were like, that's going to cost a ton of money. And he was like, I don't care, you build it. But we used technology that felt ancient. So it didn't matter if we had built a speaker that we would sell for $500 or for $10,000. From a technology perspective, they were roughly the same. You could actually buy a speaker that's 50 years old and it's still true today. If you would look at our technology, that sounds awesome. And you don't necessarily need to replace it. You might want Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, but purely for sound quality, you can buy a speaker that's 50 years old and you're fine. So we felt there's something that needs to change here.
And so the message that Timothy sent you before this all started, that changed everything. What was it in that message that made you, even the realist in you, stop and pay attention that it's time?
It was gradual, to be honest. He would send me something every night. Like, I got something new. It works. It's amazing. It's great. And then I was like, okay, let's have a look. And then there was something about it. So he was, and he still is, the optimist inventor who tries things and then is immediately excited, even if it's not there yet. I was bringing in the realism saying, well, I don't think this and this will work. but please continue because I do think there's something here. So it's not like I would tell him what to do, but I helped him to bring in realism and of course encouragement. And that's how we most of the times work together. So it wasn't just one message. Actually, it was a series of, I should show you the WhatsApp message trail. It's hundreds of messages.
Oh.
Sometimes actually after, and these things would always happen in the middle of the night. So he would start sending me messages at 11 p.m. and they would end at 1:30 a.m. Sometimes they would start very enthusiastic and they would end with, oh no, never mind. So I learned to scroll down.
You read everything.
Yeah. Over time, I learned to scroll down to just see the last message. But it's that enthusiasm that actually brought this technology to life. It wouldn't have happened any other way.
What was the technology and what about this particular one made you feel like, okay, I kind of see it?
Yeah. So classically, a speaker has a few very core components, which is a membrane. I can show you something here. So it has this surface that moves up and down. And then there's one magnet behind it in the center. If this is the membrane, there's a magnet here behind it. And then there's a copper wire that actually the electricity runs through the copper wire and it causes an interaction and then this membrane moves up and down. But Timothy, he actually moved the magnet here so this membrane can move further up and down because otherwise it would just bump into the magnet. It sounds very simple, but sound is actually movement of air. So if the membrane can move further up and down and is no longer blocked by a magnet or something else, you can get more sound from a smaller speaker. That was the core idea. And he had actually built that and he could turn it up and it actually happened. And then we were like, there's something here.
So the breakthrough was not a prettier speaker. It was let's rethink the driver itself. That is a much bigger bet, obviously. And when do you realize this was not a product tweak, but a company?
I think very early on, because the big tech companies that we all know, like Amazon, Apple, Google, coming up with their smart speaker devices. And those smart speaker devices were small and convenient. So you could put them on a tabletop or something else or in places that you would not be able to fit a large speaker. But all of them, they also wanted to be unique. And if possible, if Apple or Google or Amazon would be able to make a better speaker than JBL or Sonos, they could also win their customers. So with that knowledge and knowing that our technology can have better sound from small speakers, we were like, this is what they'll be looking for.
I really want to get into the company because it's not a speaker company. It was an IP company, a licensing company. When did you decide that in particular?
The first time that we actually heard our own technology, we were like, this is an amazing speaker. We're going to be the next Beats by Dre. We're going to build our own product, make a cool brand, and everybody's going to love it. Because Beats by Dre were known for great bass in the headphone. We're going to do the same thing for Bluetooth speakers. But as we started to investigate that path, we saw so many hurdles. Like we had to build a brand. We needed tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to do the marketing and get the right attention. We'd have to fight against the other big companies out there. Let's say they try to infringe our IP. What are we going to do? They've got a they've got a lot more money to make our lives hard. So there were quite a few hurdles. And we're also thinking about adoption of the technology. Is this the not only quickest, but the best way to have our technology everywhere in the shortest amount of time? And the answer was simply no. So also looking at what our expertise was, which was develop this amazing technology, it also felt way more to our core to focus on that and look at licensing of that technology, become the next Dolby or Intel Inside or whatever other ingredient we could be to all these other brands and actually ride their train. If they're selling millions of smart speakers, cool. We'll just take $1 of every speaker you sell, and that's super scalable.
You decided not to go into the hardware space. Why did you decide specifically on the licensing model? What it felt right at the time? Beyond
I think it was
having to build out the hardware itself.
So what we did have to do is, how you said it, develop the hardware. So it needed to be realistic that it can be manufactured in millions of pieces, that it's reliable, cost effective, etc. But again, this was risk management. We did not want to be, and it's expensive. So let's say you're going to build a tool for this thing to be manufactured in the millions. Going to cost you a ton of money, like a lot of money. And then, of course, we weren't that experienced, so we'd make mistakes. So we'd have to do it again and again. And we thought, no, this is not our business. We just want to develop technology, make sure that it is manufacturable, but we're not going to manufacture it. Imagine a recall. Apple has built millions of speakers and then you get a recall. You're done. So no, we didn't want to take that risk.
And what did it cost you? You decided obviously not to go down the manufacturing route and you're going to win by owning the architecture itself. What did that save you from and what did it cost you?
I mean, on a personal level or differently?
Looking back at the journey, would you have done anything different? And do you feel like there could have been some benefits derived from having the hardware itself?
So we talked to over 50 companies that could take our technology into a license. So if we would deliver hardware, we wouldn't just be disrupting the product architecture in general, because we're bringing in a new component. They need to look at their product line. They need to look at marketing. We would also be disrupting their supply chain. And we noticed along the way that this was too big of an ask. So when we told them, we've got the blueprints, you can take it to any manufacturer you work with, this was a way more attractive proposal to them. So we saved ourselves quite some headache on that front. On the other hand, if you manufacture it yourself, you can have a higher margin because you decide the price. We were the only one who would be able to sell it. So we could have a much higher margin, but also a much higher risk. So the question is, do you want to take the higher margin with the higher risk, or do you lower the risk and scale faster? And we chose the second.
We always talk about the highs and journeys, but I think one interesting aspect of your story was that early on in the journey, prototypes kept failing, membranes failing after minutes. What exactly was breaking? And for any founder listening to this, what did you learn from those moments?
So I can get very technical, but what it comes down to is that when you make a speaker smaller, you still have to displace the same air volume of a larger speaker. So the pressure inside the cabinet is way higher. There's a lot of pressure. And this high pressure causes a lot of issues, like the temperature inside the box goes up. So at some points we had smoke coming out of the speaker box just because the temperature went up, way up. We had membranes collapsing because of air pressure, or forces enacting on the membrane because of how it's driven from the outside. So yeah, there were quite a few things breaking. When we started, we thought we could make speakers 20 times smaller, but I think we ended at something like 10 at the most. But 10 is still quite a bit. Okay. But it was really hard to give that up. The idea of not being able to make speakers 20 times smaller. And I think that's something that perhaps founders struggle with. Like, you thought you had something which is 500% better, and it ends up being 180% better. Just not forget, it's still very interesting if it's 180% better. So we sometimes went down a rabbit hole of, no, we need to keep focusing on making this better and better. But at some point you also need to focus on, we need to make this work. And when it works, you can maybe take a next step in making it better again. So sometimes we just had to step back. Okay, let's just finish it here, make sure it works, and then we'll look at improving again.
Because the invention was patent sensitive, you couldn't go far and wide in terms of asking the world for help in your journey. How isolated did that make you feel as you were solving the problem? For anyone listening, building and solving for hard problems that are very sensitive from a patent perspective, what advice would you give to them?
The good news was, of course, we had a team. We had about 20 people, most of them engineers, focusing on solving this problem. And the nice thing was we had very diverse engineers. So we had aerospace engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. So all kinds of different perspectives on the same problem. And none of them with an audio background, which was a great help, because they would just look at, oh, this breaks. So there is something going on with stiffness, instead of it's a speaker and it should make sound. So it's a different mindset, which was really helpful. So this isolation, we just felt like a bunch of people in a cave trying to solve something before we come out. Everything we did back then was stealth. Nobody knew what we were doing until the company was sold, and everybody was like, oh, this is super cool. So yeah, it felt quite isolated, but it was fine. As long as we had a very focused team, it was fine to feel isolated.
What I really liked about what you just said there is that you didn't actually have those engineers coming from a sound background. And so because of that, they were doing it very much from a first principles perspective, which I found really interesting.
Oh, and of course, if you want, we did talk about a few specific things with outside advisors, but that was, of course, under NDA. And we never showed them the full picture. We only would show them a very specific thing. When you have also with partners that would do manufacturing of a component, we never named the component to what it actually was. For example, this small little metallic window over here, we could call it binding post because that's actually what it's called in the audio industry, but we would call it paperclip or something else. So they had no idea what they were manufacturing.
It feels like secret agent stuff, but that must have been exciting. Were there any points where there was a fear of a leak?
We kept everything very close to our chest. We were just very secretive. Like, we would have our demos inside an aluminum briefcase with lock, and it would never leave our hand. We would not put it in like the holding luggage. It would always go into the cabin luggage. So we were like eagle eyes all the time. Yeah. I would sleep with, if we'd go in a hotel, I would sleep with the briefcase underneath my bed. Don't touch it. I would sleep with the briefcase underneath my bed. Don't touch it.
At the time, it might have seemed like it was being paranoid, but in retrospect, it wasn't, because it was very useful technology that you had at the time. You said something earlier about sometimes you just have to realize it's good enough. Was there any point where you felt like maybe this isn't going to work? Because it's a brand new invention. You were punching above your weight. So was there any point where you felt like maybe we wrap this up?
Not really. So I think we did feel like it's not going to be 20. Oh, maybe it's not going to be 10. Maybe it's going to be 3 times better or smaller. So we did in our minds scale down to the idea, but we never felt like it would be impossible to make it work. And I think that's the case with many inventions or ideas. Sometimes it's just less of a breakthrough than you think it is, or you have to pivot a couple of times from a technical direction point of view. But I feel like there's always a way to make it work. The only thing is you don't want to end up at it only being 5% better. Then you might get the question, why would I do this? So of course, the benefit needs to be there. But I think if you scale down or pivot long enough, and of course you need to have the funding to do that, because if you run out of money, that's where it ends.
You also started this company with your brother, Timothy. I would love to talk about the founder dynamic because I think this matters. Timothy had the invention, sent you those WhatsApp messages overnight, and you built a company around it. That's not the same role. How do you manage your dynamic? Was it ever hard between you two?
The reason that it wasn't too difficult most of the time was that we both did what we liked. So he's able to dive really deep into a specific subject and really go down the rabbit hole and focus on it and do something amazing in that sense. I need to do at least 10 different things at the same time or I'll go crazy. That's why I, for example, managed investor relations. I tried to find our chief commercial officer. I tried to find the people that we would add to the team and to help build the company structure. Like, what entities do we need? So that's how we're able to separate our roles. It's funny that at some point we had to decide on titles. I am the younger brother, and you could think the younger brother is CEO and the older brother is CTO. That's not going to work from some perspective, right? But we both did what we liked. In practice, our roles overlapped largely in a very large part of it. And of course, our chief commercial officer, his name is Max. And we actually did most of the things, if not all things, with the three of us together. So every email chain, every WhatsApp message, every important step, we were very much aligned, the three of us.
And was Matt part of the company from the start? What was that dynamic with Matt coming into what could be an established brother relationship?
So he joined roughly 1 year in. Definitely. That was interesting in the beginning. Also because he had done startups before, which were successfully sold. He had worked in big corporates, Sony, for example, in a management role. So he brought in also a different culture in the beginning, at least, than we would have with the two of us, which you can imagine. So yeah, that took quite some adjustment. Let's say at the end of the road, you'd think we were doing everything together since day one. That's how aligned we were.
Now, you only raised $10 million in total, which is incredibly impressive for the breakthrough that you managed to achieve and being deep tech hardware as well. What was that? Was that discipline, necessity, or both?
It was actually even less. I think that's one of the published numbers, but it's less.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Even more impressive.
Yeah, it's definitely less.
Okay.
So I think it has a lot to do with our upbringing, actually, because we didn't come from a place with a lot of money, which some would say is a downside, but to us it was a great benefit because our parents taught us creativity and to be very critical about every penny that you spend. So very early on, we would have a very small office, like 4 by 4 meters roughly. And that would be our meeting room, but it would also be our prototyping lab and would also be our audio testing room. We would just rearrange it. So from 9 to 5, it's the meeting room. And then everybody else leaves the shared office space. And then we would take away everything and open our prototyping closet. And then this table becomes this big prototyping lab. And then in some other hours of the night, it would be our acoustic testing space, where others might have sought a larger office space to build those 3 different places separately. We didn't mind eating beans out of a can for lunch. So we had this very lean way of working. It was just in our systems.
I've seen the other side of it as an investor where founders raise too much money and money is thrown problems trying to solve for that product market fit without actually truly getting under the hood. What do you think were some of the benefits of you staying small?
We joined Sonos when they acquired the company. And that company was, of course, 300x larger than our startup. And I saw the other side of having a lot of resources, a lot of funding, more time, longer roadmap time than we had. I saw that being small actually forces you to be more disciplined. Being small helped us to focus on one thing specifically instead of having to manage like a publicly listed company that has shareholders that expect results every quarter. And if you have a bad quarter, please stop with your R&D. I could have a chat with the management team and make a decision that same day, and we would just turn the whole company around. The larger the ship, the larger it takes to turn the thing around. You also need, of course, the company or the people. So if you have 10,000 people and you all want them to walk in the same direction and you change direction, that's tough. Also from a motivation perspective, they all need to understand it. I don't think I would enjoy running a large company as much because all the things that I feel are important to me, which is knowing everybody's name, being able to get everybody of the company in one room and talk about the important things, that all falls away. You need to delegate it, of course, to the managers and the other people in the team. I think there's a very long list to use things small, very long list of benefits to staying small.
You've talked about eating canned beans and going months without a salary. Is there any moment from that time that you remember very clearly on how scrappy you really were?
Yeah, so this was around December of 2018, 3 years prior to the acquisition. We ran out of funding. We had a technology that seemed to be maturing quickly, but we weren't making any deals. We also didn't want to make small deals. We wanted to be a large deal. Because imagine, but making big deal takes more time. So we had run out of money, and this was month number 3 without money. So we were eating up our reserves. We were not paying ourselves any salaries. We actually also told our employees at that time, we cannot pay this month or next month. So our feelings aren't hurt if you want to leave the company. But of course, we'd be very happy and very appreciative if you can stay. And as soon as we raise any money, we'll compensate you for the time that you, of course, missed any income. So it was a very tough moment, but we survived. That's a moment I will never forget.
Fast forward, CES, Consumer Electronics Show 2022. After years of having built in the dark, suddenly the world sees it. What happened in Las Vegas? Talk to us about that moment.
Yeah, it was super exciting. We wanted to show our technologies not just for a specific size of speaker. It should work in the smallest smart speaker, but it should also work for a large party box that JBL, for example, sells. So we had built out all those different versions and sizes of the technology to show to like tech journalists, but also to the companies that we'd like to license our technology to or ultimately sell the company to. We had hired a suite, so we were not on the show floor. We had a suite in a hotel, and we made sure this time we did spend money that we got the best suite with the best view. So whenever somebody would enter the suite, they would be like, "Wow, this is amazing." And then we had our demos like all across the room. So in the kitchen area, you would find a small speaker that you would use in the kitchen, and near the TV, you would find a sound bar. And then so it felt like you were in our place with the technology actually shining in the best way possible. Of course, we had to test how everything sounded. And we were impressed ourselves. The next morning, the first tech journalist arrived and he was blown away. It felt really encouraging. And it was also the same journalist that helped us win. He wrote an article and then we won the prize, the Billboard Best of CES prize that year. So that was kind of how that week started. And thereafter, it was just like one win after another. That's how it felt. So we had set up the dominoes in a way, and it felt like everything was falling over the right way.
I think I saw somewhere that somebody thought that you were hiding a speaker. Really?
Yeah, we've had that quite a few times along the journey that people thought we were like selling snake oil or something. But yeah.
Just want to put it into perspective. So the CES is like the largest trade show held in Las Vegas every year, and it showcases the latest innovations in technology, AI, consumer. It sounds like that initial journalist writing that piece was pretty pivotal in setting the pace for that week. And then you leveraged off that to have that moment that was like, okay, this is it. It's happening.
But also, I didn't explain all of it. In the preparation part of things, we worked with a PR company and they helped us to set up a line of discussions, agreed, and even articles before we would go to CES, get everybody warmed up in a way. Since 2017, we were already meeting with roughly 50 tech and audio companies. So they had followed our journey. And we invited some of them also to our suite. And to have the press also talk about it in that positive way. I think even one of them wrote, "Why is Sonos not using this technology?"
Really?
So that's how all of it was orchestrated. And it actually really worked.
And you said it took a year's preparation. What else went into that 1 year?
So mainly product development to make sure that it all worked in the different kind of applications. It was patent work. We just wanted to gather more and more proof that this could actually go into large-scale production.
So that CES conference was really like the big launch for you guys, essentially.
I'd say so. And this is the first time we could say it's mass manufacturable at this cost. And this is what our licensing program looks like. And this is what it looks like for a small speaker. And this is what it looks like for a large speaker. And the press is enthusiastic and the consumer is enthusiastic. So We tried to build this moment of where they could only say, why not?
After the event, did the dynamic change from before? You said you had some conversations before. After the event, did you feel like you had more leverage, or did you feel like things were different, or did it feel the same, just with a little bit more firepower?
So we had enthusiasm before, quite a bit of enthusiasm, but that didn't materialize. And that's also that can be quite frustrating to a startup. Like you get a lot of positive responses, and we took it quite literally. If somebody said they were excited, we were like, oh, they must be very excited. But they were just being positive about what we were doing. So there was quite some excitement the years before, but it didn't materialize. And then during CES, that excitement turned more into how can we materialize a deal? And that's a table turning kind of event where you're like, okay, finally, we're getting to a point where something is actually going to happen.
One follow-up question. Did Matt help with the comms and the PR thing? Because that's somewhat experienced thing to know to do ahead of that event.
Definitely. Yeah, he definitely did. Like the PR company came through his network. Like most of the people that we'd met from a commercial perspective, but even our lawyer came through Max's network. And he knew, of course, how to look at things like storytelling, what media outlets would make sense to work with. Absolutely. Yeah. This is where he really shined.
And I'm assuming, just given the scale of CES, Sonos was in the room. When did these conversations become serious?
Because we had visited CES before, and we'd also had a suite there before. What we tried to do is go to CES, have a first meeting, and then we would stay in the US to go to their offices like a week or two later. Because at CES, of course, you got a part of the team, but not all of the team. And there are many stakeholders in arranging a large deal like this one. So we would get the fire started at CES. And then I think when the show ended, we drove from Vegas to Santa Barbara, which is California. And then when we were in Santa Barbara, we met more people in the management team, more people of the audio team. We ran the demos again in less than a week. We got an LOI.
And at that point, did you know that you wanted to sell, or were you looking for some sort of partnership?
No, we felt like the maximum value of this technology is going to come forward in an acquisition, especially if it's a company where it's core to their existence in a way.
Building a business to be acquired is very different from building a business to scale. Looking back, when you think of the two paths, what does the world look like if you didn't sell?
Yeah, so another path that actually was proposed to us was to raise more capital and to actually become the consumer brand. We had an investor who proposed to raise another, I think between 20 and 40 million, and to get started on building a consumer brand next to the licensing. We would still pursue licensing, but we would also build a consumer brand just to increase traction and like people knowing about us. But in that case, if that would have happened, we would no longer hold the majority share in the company as the founding team. In order to get the same, let's say, financial benefit, we would have to scale the company between 5 and 10x from where it was at that time. That would also take us another 3+ years. And we were like, no, actually, we don't want to do that. Because also our dream was to have our technology on a global scale available to the consumer, shining in the best products out there. And that's exactly what Sonos offered. So we were like, this is actually how we realized our dream, not to no longer being the majority shareholder and all the other things that would be part of that situation.
One thing I'm curious about is when you set out to start the company, did you know early on that you would want to build for it to be acquired? Was that the goal from the onset? And Sonos obviously is huge. Why them specifically?
So maybe I start with the second question first. Of course, there needed to be a cultural fit. We wanted to work with a company that had the same values, the same dream, that would be able to make something that's non-conventional, that would sound great. And that's exactly what Sonos also envisioned. And of course, it did help that they were in Santa Barbara, which is close to a beach. And that was a nice idea. I might be working in a company that's on a beach. That's pretty nice. But in general, it was just like we had the same vision, the same kind of outlook towards the market. Yeah, I think that's what really triggered us. Also, it's core to what they were doing. If, for example, let's say it would have been a Google, who were also making speakers, it's a side business. So it might just be that they at some point like fire the whole audio division and go start to do something else. And we didn't want that to happen. And Sonos couldn't just abandon audio. That would mean abandoning the company. So that's why that felt really good to us. And the first question?
First question was particularly very early on in your journey. Was the intention to sell the business at some point?
We at least thought about it from day one. I think every founder should. Like the company with our exit plan, I wouldn't feel safe. Even if you're not targeting to sell the company, you should still think, how am I going to, or how is my investor going to exit this company? What could that potentially look like? So in our strategy over the years and the pivots that we made, we always thought probably the best exit for this company is to sell the company. So we need to make sure that along the way, we don't make agreements that could prevent this company from being acquired by a strategic company.
You had advisors with very relevant industry experience, including people who understood exactly what this technical category was. How deliberate were you in building a cap table, an advisory group that could really bring influence for the company in the future?
Very deliberate. This was all done with quite some precision. At some point, we specifically sought, so we were like, okay, what gaps do we have in order to make this company very valuable? For example, if you look at licensing, you need to have somebody who is great at protecting the technology because that's what you're licensing, that's the product. And then you need somebody who's great at making license agreements. So we looked for a person that could do that. When we were going to go public, in the year before going public, we sought out a face or a name that could really help boost our look also to the consumer. And that's when we got in contact with Martin Garrix, who is a world famous DJ. So we really sought for things that mattered to make our company like inherently valuable, because that's of course where it starts, but also look valuable. And that's how we established our cap table. Some advisors didn't go into the cap table, but they were in our advisory board. And that's how we also divided and chose people we worked with.
One thing I'm hearing in your journey is how deliberate you were about both the substance and the appearance. And it's like every founder should have that in their mind because they both matter, especially if you're looking to sell your company at some point. I'd love to talk about what the exit felt like, what changed for you. You said publicly that the exit did not feel like winning the lottery. I'm curious as to what that emotion was. Mattias, many years ago, very frugal. Now at this point, the exit happens and you run into this liquidity from the exit. What did that feel like?
Yeah, it was super strange.
Really?
So the good thing was, of course, over the years, we got used to managing larger amounts of money. So first you raise 300K and then you raise 2 million and then you raise 5 million. And then you learn how to manage 5 million, which I had never done in my life before. I would have had no clue if we would have sold the company earlier on for the same sum. So also since we have been preparing for it for a year and we were like in the deal negotiation period of time, which was between January and April 2022, we were involved in every step. So 10 to 14 hours a day, we were working on deal making. So when we signed the deal, it didn't feel like a surprise or something. It was like, yeah, we've been working on this for quite a while and now it materialized. But of course, still when money hits the bank account and it's actually there, it doesn't look real. It looks virtual. And also I was Timothy as well. We were both a little bit scared. We were like, oh no, what happens if this bank goes bankrupt? And we started to put it on different bank accounts. And then I think we started to do that before the weekend. And then it was up in the air because it wasn't in account 1 and on account 2. We were like, where is it? And that was really weird. But yeah, of course, that's life-changing.
When you saw the technology inside the Sonos product, rebranded, on shelves, what was that moment like?
This was the moment that I could finally have friends and other people experience it. So we had demos before, but I couldn't just ship it to anyone and they couldn't always come over. But now I could just point to, hey, just go to the Best Buy or go to whatever electronics store and you can find the technology there. And to have very positive reviews about the technology and all the videos that Sonos created and all the PR around it. Yeah, that was super cool. I think that's a very unique moment. That's something to save and pass on to my great-great-grandchildren. Look what I did.
Yeah, I love that.
I love it. One of the things about exits that people don't really talk about is the grief that comes with it, even in the success. Did you feel that? Did you feel somewhat a feeling of, now I have this, but now I can't have another? What was the other side of the emotion for you during this process?
I don't think I felt grief. Some people also ask me, like, wasn't it hard to sell the company because it was your baby and you've been working on it for quite a while and you're so passionate about audio, and wasn't it difficult? And we were like,
what?
This kid is mature. Get it out of the house.
Okay. You were like, this is what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Let it go through its journey.
Exactly. So it was the right time. I think if it would have happened at a different point in time, let's say much earlier, perhaps it would have been different. But we have been charging towards this moment for so long. And it was just the right time. Also, we sold the company and there wasn't a break between selling the company and starting at Sonos. It was just like sign the deal on Friday, starting with the whole team on Monday. In the end, was a smooth transition, but it was also a quick transition, and we just kept working.
We are going to the end of the episode. We will go with a rapid fire. In this section, we want you to answer very quickly. Just first answer, no follow-ups, and we will enforce it too. So maybe the first one, I would say, what is the biggest mistake you made at Mayht?
I accidentally sent to a potential customer something that I want to send to my lawyer. And I sent to them, I think this company is going to try to steal our tech. Let's be very careful with the NDA. Make sure they don't steal our technology.
What was one of the hardest moments working alongside your brother in building the company?
Most of the times it was like Timothy saying, we can do this. We can be even better. We can make it even smaller, even better. And I would be like, but this is actually okay already. Let's just go to the next step. And I think those were our hardest discussions.
Yeah.
On anything else.
What do software founders misunderstand most about hardware?
I actually think that we have way more in common than they realize. In software, you have this bug list or bug report, or you make iterations. We do the same thing in hardware.
What did Sonos make possible that Mayht could not?
Getting to the consumer.
And finally, if the 7-year-old Mattias in Amsterdam West heard the Arc Ultra today, what would he think?
I think you'd be jumping around the room.
Whoa! Mattias, what stays with me from this conversation is really not just the technology, it's the patience, the willingness to spend years building something that the world hasn't validated yet, and you have to keep it to yourself till it becomes public. There's some things in life that you just need to keep your heads down and build before you bring out to the world.
Thank you so much. For me, this episode is really about the discipline that you took in building the company. You built a company that matched the nature of the invention with a small team, clear moat, strategic structure, and that is rare. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story with us. It's been incredible.
Yeah, thanks for having me for such great questions.
The pleasure is ours.
Tell us what you think of this episode on all of our platforms at the Startup Leap Pod. Do you have a question? Ask us and we'll ask our guests. Go to thestartupleap.io. See you next time.